Carl Jung once wrote something that still sends chills through psychology today. The tree that reaches toward heaven must have roots that descend into hell. What he meant was both simple and unsettling. The deeper you descend, the higher you're capable of rising. But there's something Jung never fully warned people about. When someone who has been to hell returns, they don't return unchanged. They come back as someone the world has never known them to be. And that transformation terrifies everyone who only ever knew the wounded version of you. If you've spent years being the one who absorbed everyone's pain, who stayed silent when you should have screamed, who bent yourself until you were close to breaking, then this message is for you. Because what's coming next in your life isn't just healing. It's a psychological earthquake. The people who hurt you, the ones who mistook your silence for surrender, are about to encounter something Jung documented but few people ever discuss: the return of the integrated shadow. And when that shadow comes back with consciousness attached to it, it no longer asks for permission. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why your comeback will be the most unsettling thing certain people ever witness. Not because you'll seek revenge, but because you'll become completely unreachable to the tactics that once destroyed you. Let me ask you something Jung would ask. What happens when the person everyone treated as an emotional dumping ground decides they're done absorbing and starts reflecting instead? The world is full of people who saw your kindness and mistook it for foolishness. They watched you cry and believed they had broken you. They saw you retreat into silence and assumed they had won. Every toxic person, every manipulator, every energy vampire in your life made the same fatal mistake. They believed your wound was your identity. They assumed the hurt version of you was the real you. They had no idea they were watching a caterpillar and calling it weak because it couldn't fly yet. Jung spent decades studying this exact pattern. He documented case after case of people who went through what he called the dark night of the soul. A complete psychological collapse that appeared like destruction from the outside, but was actually reconstruction. And here's what he discovered that changes everything. The people who fall the lowest often rise the highest, but never in the way anyone expects. They don't return soft and endlessly forgiving. They return precise and immovable. Think about every person who hurt you at your lowest point. The friend who disappeared when you needed support. The family member who kicked you while you were down. The partner who betrayed you when you were most vulnerable. Every one of them made the same assumption. They thought your depth of feeling was a weakness. They believed your empathy was a flaw. They assumed your silence meant you had accepted defeat. But here's what Jung understood that they never will. Silence isn't always submission. Sometimes silence is observation. Sometimes retreat isn't loss. It's preparation. While they were celebrating what they believed was your destruction, you were in what Jung called the incubation period. You were in the cocoon, and they mistook your transformation for your end. The psychological term for what you experienced is the night sea journey. Jung borrowed this from ancient mythology. The hero is swallowed by the whale, descends into darkness, and emerges transformed. But most people miss the critical detail. The hero doesn't return to make peace with the whale. The hero returns as someone the whale can never swallow again. That's who you are now. You're not the person who was hurt. You're the version of yourself that can't be hurt in the same way twice. Here's where it becomes especially interesting psychologically. While you were quiet, while you were healing, while everyone assumed you were broken, something was happening in your unconscious that Jung called shadow integration. Your shadow isn't evil. Your shadow is every part of you were taught to suppress. Your anger, your boundaries, your ability to say no, your willingness to walk away without explaining yourself, your capacity to let people face the consequences of how they treated you. For years, maybe decades, you kept that shadow locked away because you were taught that good people don't get angry, don't set hard boundaries, don't cut people off, don't stop caring. You were taught that your value came from how much you could endure, so you endured everything. You absorbed everyone's dysfunction. You made yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. You carried everyone's emotional baggage while they criticized you for moving too slowly under the weight. But something shifted during your darkest period. You met your shadow, and instead of fearing it, instead of pushing it back down, you did something that changes everything. You integrated it. You looked at your anger and said, "You're not my enemy. You're my protection." You looked at your boundaries and said, You're not cruel. You're necessary. You looked at your ability to cut people off and said, you're not cold. You're wise. Jung called this process individuation. Becoming whole by accepting every part of yourself, even the parts society told you to hide. And here's what makes this process so powerful and so frightening to certain people. Once you integrate your shadow, you become psychologically complete. You're no longer operating from just your light side, trying to be good enough for people who will never value you. You're operating from your whole self. Light and dark. Soft and sharp. Kind and immovable. The version of you that's returning isn't trying to prove anything. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful. The old you would have written paragraphs explaining yourself. The new you doesn't explain. The old you would have apologized for things that were never your fault. The new you doesn't apologize for taking up space. The old you needed people to understand your point of view. The new you doesn't require anyone's understanding or approval. And this is exactly why your return will terrify everyone who only ever knew the wounded version of you. They built their entire connection with you around your willingness to shrink. They got comfortable with a version of you that absorbed their toxicity without reflecting it back. They turned your empathy into a weapon. They took advantage of your forgiveness. They confused your patience with permission to treat you however they pleased. But now, when they look at you, something feels off. They can't quite explain it, but they sense it. You're no longer reactive, which unsettles them because they relied on your reactions. You no longer explain yourself, which frustrates them because they expected you to defend yourself while they attacked. You no longer chase their approval, which terrifies them because your need for their approval was the source of their power. Jung documented this phenomenon in detail. He observed that when someone individuates, when they become psychologically whole, they carry a different presence. It isn't aggressive. It isn't cruel. It's simply solid, unmovable. There are no openings left for manipulation to slip through. No buttons remain to be pushed because you disconnected all of them. And to those who only knew how to relate to you through control, guilt, and manipulation, this new version of you feels like a stranger. A stranger they can't control. And that's what frightens them most. Let me explain exactly what they're experiencing when they see the new you. Even if they can't put it into words, they're encountering what Jung called the mirror effect. For years, you absorbed their toxicity. You functioned like a sponge, soaking up their bad behavior, their projections, their dysfunction. They could be cruel, and you'd come back wondering what you did wrong. They could betray you, and you'd forgive them before they ever apologized. They could ignore your needs, and you'd convince yourself those needs didn't matter. But when you integrated your shadow, when you became whole, you stopped absorbing. You became a mirror. Now when they project their toxicity onto you, it doesn't sink in. It reflects back at them. When they try to manipulate you, they see the manipulation clearly reflected in your calm refusal to engage. When they attempt to guilt you, their guilt-tripping tactics are exposed in your silence. When they try to gaslight you, their lies are revealed by your refusal to doubt yourself anymore. This is psychologically devastating for them because most manipulative people operate unconsciously. They don't analyze their behavior. They act on impulse and habit. But when you become a mirror, you force them to see themselves clearly. And most of them can't tolerate what they see. So they do exactly what Jung predicted. They escalate. They push harder to bring the old you back. They love bomb you. They guilt trip you. They play the victim. They try to activate your empathy by acting wounded by your change. But here's what Jung understood, and what you need to understand now. Their escalation isn't because they miss you. It's because they miss having power over you. They don't miss the relationship. They miss the hierarchy where you were beneath them. They don't miss your presence. They miss your tolerance of their absence. They don't miss you. They miss who you were willing to be for them. And this is where your comeback becomes truly terrifying to them. Because the old you would have seen their escalation and thought, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should give them another chance. Maybe I'm the problem. The old you would have convinced yourself that boundaries were cruelty. But the new you, the individuated you, recognizes their escalation for what it is, a manipulation strategy. And you don't react. You don't engage. You don't explain why you're done. You're simply done. Jung wrote extensively about what he called participation mystique, an unconscious psychological bond between people. In healthy relationships, this bond is mutual and respectful. In toxic ones, it becomes parasitic. One person feeds on the other's energy, validation, or emotional labor. And for years, you were the one being fed on. But when you integrated your shadow, when you became whole, you severed that parasitic connection. You cut the energetic cord. And now they're experiencing withdrawal. That's what you're witnessing when they suddenly reappear, confused about why you've changed. That's what's happening when they say, "You've changed," with disappointment in their voice, as if you owed them the wounded version forever. That's what drives their desperate attempts to provoke you, to get any response at all, even a negative one, because any reaction means they still have access to your energy. But you're no longer giving them access. And that loss of supply is what truly terrifies them. The irony Jung would have appreciated is this. They created the version of you they're now afraid of. Every time they hurt you and you stayed silent, you weren't being weak. You were observing. Every time they betrayed you and you absorbed the pain, you weren't being naive. You were learning exactly who they were. Every time they pushed your boundaries and you didn't push back, you weren't being a doormat. You were collecting data. And now you hold a complete psychological profile of who they are. That knowledge is power they can never take back. You know their patterns. You recognize their tactics. You understand the words they use to manipulate. You see the vulnerabilities they exploit. You know how they operate. And they know that you know. That's what creates the fear in their eyes when they see you now. It's not that you're going to expose them. It's that you could. It's not that you'll retaliate. It's that you don't need to. Your indifference is more powerful than any revenge ever could be. Jung had a term for what you're experiencing now, enantiodromia, the tendency of things to transform into their opposite. The one who gave the most becomes selective with their energy. The one who forgave endlessly becomes discerning about who deserves forgiveness. The one who understood everyone becomes clear about whose behavior they refuse to explain away. The person who once accommodated everyone becomes unmovable about their boundaries. This isn't bitterness. This isn't becoming cold or heartless. This is psychological evolution. This is what happens when someone stops abandoning themselves to maintain relationships with people who abandoned them first. This is what happens when empathy becomes integrated with wisdom. This is what happens when kindness is paired with boundaries. This is what happens when you realize that sometimes the most spiritual act is allowing people to experience the consequences of how they treat others. Now let's talk about what happens when one of these people, someone who knew the wounded version of you, decides to test the new you. They can't help it. Their unconscious mind needs to know whether the old dynamic still exists. So they try something. Maybe they send a message pretending nothing ever happened. Maybe they show up somewhere they know you'll be. Maybe they attempt guilt, create drama, or try to activate your empathy through manipulation. And this is where everything Jung taught about individuation reveals itself. The old you would have felt that familiar pull. The obligation to respond, to explain, to repair, to restore peace. Your heart would have raced. Your mind would have rehearsed every possible response. You would have felt guilty for having boundaries at all. But the new you, the individuated you, feels nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just nothing. A calm, clear, completely unmovable nothing. This is what Jung called being centered in the self. You're no longer reactive to manipulation because you're no longer invested in maintaining their image of you. You're no longer explaining yourself because you're no longer seeking their understanding. You're no longer defending yourself because you're no longer standing trial in their court. You've removed yourself from the entire dynamic so thoroughly that their attempts to engage simply dissolve into nothing. And when they see that, when it finally registers that you are genuinely, completely done, that's when fear sets in for them. Because toxic people operate on a very specific psychological assumption. They believe everyone functions the way they do. They assume your kindness was strategic. They believe your empathy was manipulative. They think your forgiveness was weakness. They project their own psychology onto you. So when you cut them off, they assume it's a tactic. They think you're playing a game. They believe you're trying to provoke them into chasing you. They assume you're waiting for an apology so you can regain control. But you're not playing anything. You're not waiting. You're simply finished. And the reality that you genuinely no longer care is something they can't comprehend. They keep checking your social media, searching for any sign that you're thinking about them. They ask mutual friends about you, hoping to hear that you're struggling without them. They create small situations hoping to provoke a reaction. But you don't respond, because they no longer exist in your inner world. You're focused on becoming the highest version of yourself. And they're no longer even a footnote in that story. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. And that's exactly what's unfolding in your life right now. You're shedding every false identity you built to satisfy people who were never satisfied. You're releasing every trauma bond you maintained because you confused loyalty with self-abandonment. You're stepping into a version of yourself that exists independently of anyone's approval or disapproval. And that version of you, whole, integrated, complete, is the one that terrifies everyone who only knew the wounded you. Because the wounded you was controllable. The healed you is sovereign. The wounded you needed validation from the outside. The healed you generates it from within. The wounded you feared being alone. The healed you understands that solitude is better than being diminished. The wounded you believed love meant sacrifice. The healed you knows love means mutual respect or nothing at all. This is your comeback. Not loud. Not dramatic. Not vengeful. Just absolute. Just complete. Just final. You're not returning to prove anything. You're not coming back to get closure from people who never offered honesty. You're not returning to make them understand what they did wrong. You're returning to yourself. And that return requires leaving them behind for good. The most powerful thing Jung ever said about this process was this: I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And you've chosen to become someone who no longer serves as a container for other people's dysfunction. You've chosen to become someone whose peace is non-negotiable. You've chosen to become someone who understands that those who can't celebrate your growth were never meant to walk with you into your future. So when they look at you now with confusion, frustration, and that fear they can't quite name, understand what you're witnessing. You're seeing the moment a manipulator realizes their tactics no longer work. You're seeing the moment a narcissist realizes their supply has run dry. You're seeing the moment a toxic person understands that the one they took for granted is now completely unavailable to them. And that unavailability, that indifference, that calm refusal to engage, is what truly terrifies them. Because it means they've lost something they can never recover: access to you. Your comeback was never about them. It never was. Your comeback is about reclaiming every part of yourself you gave away trying to maintain relationships with people who never maintained you. It's about stepping into power that was always yours, but that you were taught to suppress. It's about choosing yourself with the same fierce loyalty you once gave to people who never chose you in return. And if they're afraid of this version of you, good. Let them be afraid. Their fear is not your responsibility. Their discomfort with your boundaries is not your burden. Their inability to manipulate you anymore is not something you need to fix. You are done making yourself small so others can feel big. You are done staying wounded so others can feel powerful. You are done explaining, defending, and shrinking yourself. Jung spent his life studying human transformation, and he concluded that the highest psychological achievement is individuation, becoming fully and authentically yourself. And that is exactly what you're doing. You're not becoming bitter. You're becoming boundaried. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming careful. You're not becoming cruel. You're becoming conscious. So to everyone who only knew the wounded you, who grew comfortable with that version, who assumed it would last forever, your comeback will terrify them. Not because you've become someone harmful, but because you've become someone they can never control again. And to those whose entire relationship with you depended on your tolerance for mistreatment, your refusal to tolerate it now feels like the end of their world. And it is. It's the end of the world where they had power over you. And it's the beginning of the world where you have power over yourself. If you recognize yourself in this journey, If you're the one returning changed, comment below. I am done explaining myself, because that is the mark of true integration. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who never wanted to understand you in the first place is the moment you become truly free. And remember, your comeback doesn't need witnesses. It only needs to be real. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.